The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under the door like a thief in the night, its crisp edges slicing through Caleb's world. "You have 1 month to move out," it read, signed in his father's jagged scrawl. At 25, Caleb stood frozen in the dim hallway of the only home he'd ever known, the weight of betrayal heavier than the oak door behind him. Caleb's fingers trembled as he clutched the paper, his hazel eyes scanning the words again, hoping they'd shift into something less cruel. His father, Richard, had always been a man of sharp edges, quick to judge, slow to forgive, but this was a gut punch. The house in Maplewood, New Jersey, wasn't just walls and a roof. It was where Caleb had grown up, where his mother's laughter still echoed in the creak of the stairs, where he'd come out to her at 16, her arms wrapping him in love so fierce it drowned out the world's noise. She'd been gone 3 years now, cancer stealing her breath, and Richard had remarried 6 months ago. Diane, his new wife, brought her 2 teenage daughters and a hunger for space that, apparently, no longer included Caleb. He sank onto the couch, the letter crumpling in his fist. The living room, with its faded plaid curtains and scuffed hardwood, felt like a museum of his past. He could still see his mother here, humming as she arranged wildflowers in a chipped vase. Now, Diane's touch was everywhere: new throw pillows, a sleek coffee table, photos of her daughters crowding the mantel where Caleb's childhood pictures used to sit. He wasn't just being erased from the house. He was being erased from his own history. His phone buzzed, pulling him from the haze. A text from Jamie. "You okay? Missed you at the diner." Jamie, with his sharp jawline and quiet strength, was the one person who could make Caleb's world feel steady. They'd met 2 years ago at a local bookstore, bonding over dog-eared copies of Vonnegut and Too Strong coffee. Jamie was 26, a graphic designer with a laugh that could thaw any frost, and the first man Caleb had ever loved. But coming out to Richard had been a disaster. Shouted words, a slammed door, and months of silence. Caleb hadn't dared tell his father about Jamie, not when Richard's disapproval already hung like a storm cloud. Caleb typed back, "Need to see you. Can you come over?" He hit send, his heart racing. He needed Jamie's clarity, his courage, because if Richard thought Caleb would pack up and vanish quietly, he was dead wrong. The park was their sanctuary, a quiet stretch of green where Maplewood's bustle faded into birdsong. Caleb sat on their usual bench, the one carved with initials from decades of lovers, and waited. Jamie arrived, his dark hair catching the late afternoon sun, his eyes narrowing with concern as he saw Caleb's face. "What happened?" Jamie asked, sitting close, their knees brushing. Caleb handed him the letter, watching as Jamie's expression hardened. "He's kicking you out. For her family." Caleb nodded, his throat tight. "Diane's daughters need stability," he says, like I'm some tenant who overstayed his welcome. Jamie's hand found his, fingers interlocking with a quiet strength. "You're his son. This is your home." "Not anymore," Caleb said, bitterness creeping into his voice. "He's choosing them over me. Always has. Since Mom died." Jamie's jaw tightened. "You don't have to accept this. Fight it. Caleb, you deserve to stay." Caleb looked at him. The man who'd taught him love could be a safe harbor, not a battlefield. Jamie had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes, never knowing permanence until he carved it out for himself. If anyone understood fighting for a place to belong, it was him. "How?" Caleb asked, voice barely above a whisper. "He owns the house. I've got no leverage." Jamie's eyes gleamed with defiance. "You've got you. And you've got me. We'll figure it out." That night, they sat in Caleb's bedroom, the one space still untouched by Diane's influence. Posters of indie bands lined the walls, and a photo of Caleb and his mother sat on the nightstand, her smile a quiet anchor. Jamie sprawled on the bed, scrolling through legal forums on his laptop, while Caleb paced. "There's got to be something," Jamie said. "Tenant rights. Inheritance laws. Your mom's name was on the deed, right?" Caleb stopped. "Yeah. It was their house together. But after she died, it went to Dad." "Doesn't mean you don't have a claim," Jamie said, sitting up. "We need to dig into the paperwork. Wills. Trusts. Anything." Caleb's chest tightened with a flicker of hope, but doubt gnawed at him. Richard was a lawyer, meticulous and ruthless. If he wanted Caleb gone, he'd have covered his bases. Still, Jamie's resolve was contagious. They spent hours combing through old emails, digging out boxes from the attic, searching for anything that might give Caleb a foothold. By midnight, they found it, a faded copy of his mother's will, tucked in a folder of tax documents. It named Caleb as a co-beneficiary of the house, a detail Richard had never mentioned. "This is it," Jamie said, his voice electric. "He can't just push you out. Not legally." Caleb stared at the paper, his mother's careful handwriting blurring through tears. She'd protected him, even now. But confronting Richard would mean war. Caleb wasn't sure he was ready to fight. Yet as he looked at Jamie, at the fierce belief in his eyes, Caleb felt something shift. This wasn't just about a house. It was about his right to exist, to love, to claim his place in a world that kept trying to shove him aside. "I'm not leaving," Caleb said, the words solidifying in the air. "Not without a fight." Jamie grinned, pulling him into a hug. "That's my guy." The next morning, Caleb stood at the kitchen counter, the will in one hand, his father's letter in the other. Richard walked in, his suit crisp, his face unreadable. "You got my note," he said, pouring coffee like it was just another day. "Yeah," Caleb replied, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "And I'm not going anywhere." Richard's eyes narrowed, but Caleb held his ground. The battle had begun. The kitchen felt like a courtroom, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Richard set his coffee mug down with a deliberate clink, his gaze locking onto Caleb's. "What do you mean? You're not going anywhere?" he asked, his voice low, almost a growl. Caleb's heart pounded, but he held up the copy of his mother's will, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. "Mom left me part of this house. You can't just kick me out to make room for Diane's kids." Richard's face tightened, a flicker of surprise betraying his usual composure. "That will's irrelevant," he said, stepping closer. "I own this house. Your mother's wishes don't override my rights." "Then why didn't you tell me about it?" Caleb shot back, his voice rising. "You hid it, Dad. You hid her from me." The accusation hung between them, sharp and raw. Richard's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. Instead, he turned away, grabbing his briefcase. "We'll talk later," he said, his tone final, as if Caleb were a client to be dismissed. The front door slammed behind him, leaving Caleb alone with the echo of his own words. He sank into a chair, the will still clutched in his hand. The fight had only just started, but it already felt like a war he might lose. Richard's confidence, his lawyer's instinct, was a wall Caleb didn't know how to climb. But he wasn't alone. Jamie's voice echoed in his mind. "You've got you. And you've got me." By noon, Jamie was back, armed with a notepad and a plan. They sat at the dining table, now cluttered with legal documents and takeout coffee cups. Jamie had called in a favor from a friend, a paralegal named Mia who knew her way around property law. Over speakerphone, Mia's voice was calm but firm. If your mom's will names you as a co-beneficiary, you have a legal stake, she said, but you'll need a lawyer to enforce it. Your dad's probably banking on you not fighting back. Caleb rubbed his temples. I can't afford a lawyer. I work at a bookstore, not a law firm. We'll find a way, Jamie said, squeezing his hand. There's pro bono help. Legal aid. We just need to start. Mia suggested they file a claim to contest Richard's eviction notice, but it would mean digging deeper into the house's paperwork deeds, trusts, anything that could clarify Caleb's rights. The problem was, most of those documents were in Richard's study, a room Caleb hadn't entered since he was a kid. It was Richard's fortress, all locked drawers and polished order. We have to get in there, Jamie said, his eyes glinting with determination. If he's hiding something, that's where it'll be. Caleb hesitated. Sneaking into his father's study felt like crossing a line, but so did that eviction letter. Okay, he said finally, but we need to be careful. That night, with Richard and Diane at a dinner party, Caleb and Jamie crept into the study. The room smelled of leather and old paper, a shrine to Richard's control. Caleb's hands shook as he tried the desk drawers. All locked. Jamie, ever resourceful, pulled a small toolkit from his Baga remnant of his foster kid days, when he'd learned to pick locks to protect his few belongings. Got it, Jamie whispered, popping open a drawer after a tense minute. Inside were files labeled with dates and names, including one marked Property, Maplewood. Caleb's pulse raced as he pulled it out, flipping through pages of legalese. There it was, a trust agreement, signed by both his parents, stating the house was to be held for Caleb until he was 30 or married. Richard had never mentioned it. He lied, Caleb said, his voice breaking. He's been lying this whole time. Jamie's hand rested on his shoulder. We've got him now. This is your leverage. But leverage came with a cost. Confronting Richard again would mean escalation. Maybe even a courtroom battle. Caleb wasn't just fighting for a house. He was fighting for his mother's memory, for his place in a family that seemed to want him gone. And he was fighting for Jamie for the life they were building, the love Richard refused to acknowledge. The next day, Caleb took the trust agreement to a legal aid clinic in Newark. The lawyer, a woman named Ms. Torres with a no-nonsense demeanor, confirmed what Mia had suspected. The trust gave Caleb a strong claim. You can file an injunction to stop the eviction, she said, but it'll get messy. Your father's a lawyer. He won't go down easy. Caleb nodded, his resolve hardening. I'm ready. Back home, he found Diane in the living room, rearranging furniture with her daughters, Lily and Grace. The girls, 15 and 17, glanced at him with unease, sensing the tension. Diane, however, met his gaze with cool indifference. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Caleb, she said, folding her arms. This is about family. My girls need a home. So do I, Caleb said, his voice steady. This was my mom's house too. Diane's lips thinned, but she didn't respond. Caleb walked away, feeling the weight of her stare. He knew she wasn't the real enemy Richard was, but her presence, her claim on his space, felt like an invasion. That evening, Jamie cooked dinner in Caleb's tiny kitchen, a rare moment of normalcy. As they ate, Caleb felt a flicker of hope. If we win this, he said, maybe we can make this place ours. You and me. Jamie smiled, his eyes soft. I'd like that. But the moment was shattered by a knock at the door. Richard stood there, his face a mask of fury. You went through my study, he demanded, holding up the trust agreement Caleb had left on the desk. You think you can play lawyer against me? Caleb stood tall, Jamie at his side. I'm not playing. Dad, I'm fighting for what's mine. Richard's voice was a blade, cutting through the quiet of the evening. You're making a mistake, Caleb, he said, stepping into the apartment. The trust agreement crumpled in his fist. You think you can take me on? I've been a lawyer for 30 years. Caleb's pulse thundered, but Jamie's presence beside him was a steady anchor. I don't want to fight you, Dad, Caleb said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. But you're not giving me a choice. This house is mine too. Richard's eyes flicked to Jamie, narrowing with disdain. This about him? He asked, jerking his chin toward Jamie. You're throwing away your family for what? A phase. The word hit Caleb like a slap. He'd heard it before, in late-night arguments when he'd first come out, when Richard had called his identity a choice he'd grow out of. But now, with Jamie standing there, the man who'd held him through panic attacks and celebrated his smallest victories, the insult felt like a declaration of war. It's not a phase, Caleb said, stepping closer to his father. And Jamie's not the issue. You're trying to erase me from this house, from Mom's memory, to make room for your new life. I won't let you. Richard's face reddened, but before he could respond, Jamie spoke, his voice calm but unyielding. Mr. Harper, with all due respect, Caleb's not alone in this. He has rights, and we have proof. You can't just bully him out. The room crackled with tension. Richard looked between them, his lawyer's mind clearly calculating. Then he turned and left without another word, the door slamming in his wake. Caleb exhaled, his knees weak, but Jamie's arm around his shoulders kept him steady. You okay? Jamie asked, his voice soft. Caleb nodded, though his chest ached. I didn't think he'd hate me this much. He doesn't hate you, Jamie said, pulling him close. He's scared. Scared of losing control, of you being your own person. But you're stronger than he thinks. The next week was a blur of preparation. Ms. Torres helped Caleb file the injunction, a legal lifeline to stall the eviction. The process was daunting: court forms, deadlines, and the looming threat of Richard's legal prowess. Caleb spent his days at the bookstore, shelving novels while his mind raced, and his nights with Jamie, poring over strategies. Jamie's optimism was infectious, but Caleb couldn't shake the fear that this fight would cost him more than just the house. One evening, as they walked through Maplewood's downtown, Jamie stopped at a small law office with a rainbow flag in the window. They do pro bono work for LGBTQ cases, he said, pointing. Maybe they can help. Inside, they met Alex, a lawyer in his 30s with a warm smile and a sharp mind. He listened to Caleb's story, his brow furrowing as he reviewed the trust agreement. This is solid, he said. Your mom set this up to protect you. Your father's trying to sidestep it, but we can challenge that. It'll take time, though, and it might get ugly. Uglier than it already is, Caleb asked, half joking. Alex chuckled. Point taken. But you've got a case. And you've got heart. That counts for something. Heart. Caleb clung to that word as they left the office. He'd spent years hiding parts of himself, dimming his light to avoid his father's judgment. But now, with Jamie's hand in his and a legal fight ahead, he felt a fire kindling inside him. This wasn't just about a house. It was about claiming his right to exist as he was. Back home, tension simmered. Diane's daughters avoided Caleb, their whispers stopping whenever he entered a room. Diane herself was colder, her comments laced with passive aggression. It's such a small house, she'd say, rearranging his mother's old vases. Hardly room for everyone. Caleb bit his tongue, knowing she was baiting him. But each jab stung. One night, he found Lily, the younger daughter, sitting alone on the porch. She was 15, quiet, with a sketchbook always in hand. "You don't have to hate me," Caleb said, sitting beside her. "I'm not trying to take anything from you." Lily looked up, her eyes wary. "Mom says you're causing trouble, that we need this house more than you." Caleb's heart sank. This was my mom's house too. I just want what she wanted for me. Lily didn't respond, but her expression softened. And for a moment, Caleb saw a flicker of understanding. Maybe she wasn't the enemy either. Maybe she was just caught in the same storm. The first court date loomed. A preliminary hearing to argue the injunction. Caleb barely slept, his dreams haunted by his father's cold stare. Jamie stayed over, his presence a quiet comfort. As they lay in bed, Caleb traced the lines of Jamie's face, memorizing the curve of his smile. "What if we lose?" he whispered. "We won't," Jamie said, kissing his forehead. "And even if we do, we'll build something new. Together." The words carried Caleb through the night. But as dawn broke, the weight of the fight settled back in. He was ready to face his father in court. But the cost of that battle, win or lose, was still unclear. The courthouse in Newark was a hulking brick building, its corridors echoing with the shuffle of feet and the murmur of nervous voices. Caleb sat on a hard bench outside the courtroom, his tie too tight, his palms sweaty. Jamie sat beside him, scrolling through his phone for last-minute encouragement from Mia, while Alex reviewed notes, his calm demeanor a lifeline. "Just tell the truth," Alex said, adjusting his glasses. "The trust speaks for itself." Caleb nodded, but his stomach churned. Across the hall, Richard stood with his own lawyer, a sleek man in a tailored suit who radiated confidence. Richard's eyes met Caleb's for a moment, cold and unyielding, before he turned away. It was the first time Caleb had seen his father since their confrontation, and the distance between them felt like a chasm. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with formality. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and graying hair, listened as Alex presented the trust agreement, arguing that Caleb's eviction violated his mother's wishes. Richard's lawyer countered, claiming the house was solely Richard's to manage, the trust outdated and irrelevant. Caleb's heart sank as the lawyer painted him as a freeloader, a grown man clinging to a home he no longer needed. When it was Caleb's turn to speak, his voice shook at first but grew steadier. "This isn't just about a house," he said, looking at the judge. "It's about my mom. She wanted me to have a home, a place where I could be myself. My father's trying to take that away, not because I've done anything wrong, but because he doesn't accept who I am." The judge's expression didn't change, but Caleb felt Jamie's hand squeeze his under the table. "A silent I'm here." Richard's lawyer pressed harder, questioning Caleb's financial independence, his lifestyle, each word a veiled jab at his relationship with Jamie. Caleb answered calmly, but inside, he was screaming. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was his life on trial. The hearing ended with no ruling, just a date for the next session. Outside, Richard approached, his voice low. "You're embarrassing yourself. Caleb, drop this, and we can work something out." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Like what? You letting me stay out of pity?" Richard's silence was answer enough. He walked away, leaving Caleb with a mix of anger and grief. Jamie pulled him into a hug, whispering, "You did good. You stood up." Back in Maplewood, the house felt like a battleground. Diane's daughters tiptoed around Caleb, and Diane herself barely spoke, her resentment palpable. But one afternoon, Grace, the older daughter, approached him in the kitchen. "I heard about court," she said, her voice hesitant. "I didn't know about your mom's will." Caleb looked at her, surprised. "Yeah, she wanted me to have a home." Grace fidgeted, her eyes on the floor. "Mom makes it sound like you're just in the way, but I don't think that's fair." Her words, tentative as they were, cracked something open in Caleb. Maybe there was a chance to bridge the divide, to show Diane's family he wasn't the enemy. He thanked Grace, and she gave a small smile before retreating. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, Jamie brought over pizza, and they sat on the porch, the summer air warm and thick. "I keep thinking about what you said," Caleb told him, "about building something new. Even if I lose the house, I want us to have a future." Jamie's eyes softened. "We will. House or no house. I'm not going anywhere." But the future felt uncertain as the next court date approached. Alex warned that Richard's lawyer was digging into Caleb's past, looking for anything to discredit him. "They'll try to paint you as unstable," Alex said. "Your job, your relationship, anything to weaken your claim." Caleb's stomach twisted. His job at the bookstore barely covered rent, and his relationship with Jamie was the one thing keeping him grounded. If Richard used that against him, it wouldn't just be about losing the house, it would be about losing everything. The night before the next hearing, Caleb found an old journal of his mother's in the attic, tucked in a box of her things. Her words were a balm, filled with love for him, dreams for his future. One entry read, "Caleb, you are my heart. Never let anyone make you feel less than you are." Tears stung his eyes as he read. Jamie's arm around him, his mother's voice, even now, gave him strength. In court, Richard's lawyer came prepared, presenting Caleb's spotty work history and implying his personal choices made him unfit to claim the house. But Alex countered fiercely, highlighting the trust's clear intent and Caleb's deep ties to the home. The judge listened, her face unreadable, and set a final hearing for a month later. As they left, Caleb felt a strange mix of hope and dread. He was fighting, harder than he ever had, but the cost was mounting. And yet, with Jamie's hand in his, he knew one thing: he wasn't backing down. The weeks before the final hearing were a tightrope walk. Caleb's days blurred into a rhythm of work, legal prep, and stolen moments with Jamie, each one a reminder of what he was fighting for. But the weight of the battle was heavy. Every glance from Diane, every cold silence from Richard, felt like a reminder that he was an outsider in his own home. At the bookstore, Caleb found solace in the quiet stacks, where stories offered escape. His boss, a kind older woman named Ellen, noticed his distraction. "You're carrying something heavy, aren't you?" she said one slow afternoon, sliding a cup of tea across the counter. Caleb managed a smile. "Just family stuff." Ellen nodded, her eyes knowing. Family can break your heart, but it can also make you stronger. Don't let them dim you, Caleb. Her words echoed his mother's, and Caleb clung to them as he faced the next hurdle, a deposition with Richard's lawyer. Alex coached him through it, warning that they'd try to rattle him. In a sterile conference room, the lawyer grilled Caleb on everything: his income, his plans, his relationship with Jamie. "You're asking the court to prioritize you over your father's new family," the lawyer said, his tone sharp. "Why should your needs come first?" Caleb took a breath, picturing Jamie's steady gaze. "Because this house was my mom's too. She wanted me to have a home, not just a place to sleep. And I'm not asking to take it from anyone. I am asking to keep what's mine." The lawyer's eyes narrowed, but Caleb held his ground. When it was over, Alex clapped him on the back. "You nailed it. They're grasping at straws. But the victory was bittersweet. That night, Caleb found a new letter from Richard. This one slipped into his mailbox. Drop the case, or I'll make sure you regret it. No signature. Just a threat that chilled Caleb to the bone. He showed it to Jamie, who cursed under his breath. He's scared, Jamie said. He knows you're winning. Caleb wasn't so sure. Richard's threat felt like a storm cloud, and the idea of losing not just the house, but his father's last shred of respect gnawed at him. He and Jamie spent the evening strategizing, but Caleb's mind kept drifting to his mother's journal, to her unwavering belief in him. He had to keep going. For her. For himself. For the life he wanted with Jamie. The final hearing loomed, and tension in the house reached a breaking point. Diane confronted Caleb one morning, her voice icy. You're tearing this family apart, she said, her daughters hovering behind her. Why can't you just move on? Caleb's temper flared. This is my home too. You don't get to decide who belongs here. Lily, the younger daughter, spoke up, her voice small. I don't want you to leave. Caleb, it's not fair. Diane's face tightened, but she didn't argue. Caleb saw a crack in her armor, a hint that she might be questioning her role in this fight. It wasn't much, but it gave him hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to coexist. The night before the hearing, Jamie took Caleb to their park bench, the one place where the world felt right. They sat under the stars, hands entwined, the air cool against their skin. No matter what happens tomorrow, Jamie said, we've got this. You and me. Caleb leaned into him, his heart full. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd fight, Jamie said, kissing him softly. But you don't have to do it alone. The courtroom was packed on the final day, the air thick with anticipation. Alex presented their case with precision, laying out the trust, Caleb's ties to the house, and Richard's attempt to circumvent his late wife's wishes. Richard's lawyer fought back, arguing that Caleb's claim was sentimental, not legal, and that Richard's new family deserved priority. When Caleb took the stand, he spoke from the heart. This house isn't just a building, he said, his voice steady. It's where I learned who I am, where my mom taught me to be proud of it. My father wants to take that from me, not because I don't belong, but because he doesn't understand me. I'm fighting for my home, but I'm also fighting for my right to love who I love, to live as I am. The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone. Even Richard's face softened for a moment, a flicker of something guilt, maybe crossing his features. The judge adjourned for deliberation, leaving Caleb drained but resolute. Outside, Jamie pulled him close. You were incredible, he said. No matter what, I'm so proud of you. Caleb nodded, his throat tight. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt like he was truly standing up for himself, not just for a house, but for his place in the world. The wait for the judge's ruling was agonizing, each day stretching like a lifetime. Caleb threw himself into work at the bookstore, shelving novels with a mechanical focus. But his mind was elsewhere in the house, on his father, on the life he and Jamie dreamed of. At night, he'd lie awake, Jamie's steady breathing beside him, wondering if he'd done enough. One afternoon, Ellen caught him staring blankly at a stack of books. You're waiting for something big, aren't you? She said, her voice gentle. Whatever it is. Caleb, you're stronger than you know. He managed a nod, her words a small comfort. But the uncertainty gnawed at him. What if the judge sided with Richard? What if all this fighting was for nothing? Jamie sensed his spiraling thoughts and took him to their park, their bench a quiet refuge. You've done everything you can, Jamie said. his hand warm in Caleb's. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out. Together. Caleb leaned into him, the weight of the past months easing just a little. I just want a place where we can be us, he said. No fighting. No hiding. We'll get there, Jamie promised, his voice steady. One way or another. A week later, the ruling came. Caleb and Jamie sat in Alex's office, the air thick with tension as Alex opened the envelope. The judge upheld the trust. He said, a smile breaking across his face. Caleb, you have a legal right to stay in the house until you're 30 or married, just like your mom wanted. Richard can't evict you. Caleb's breath caught, relief flooding him like sunlight. Jamie hooped, pulling him into a hug so tight it stole his air. We did it, Jamie whispered, his voice thick with emotion. But the victory was bittersweet. The ruling didn't erase the rift with Richard, didn't undo the months of tension. Caleb knew his father wouldn't let this go easily. That evening, he found Richard in the living room, alone, staring at an old photo of Caleb's mother. For the first time in months, Richard looked human. You won, Richard said, his voice flat, not meeting Caleb's eyes. What now? Caleb took a deep breath. I'm staying. But I don't want to fight you forever. Dad, I just want a home. Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stood and left the room, the silence heavier than any words. Caleb's heart ached for the father he'd lost, for the family they might never be. But he wasn't alone. Jamie was there, and so was his mother's love, woven into the walls of the house she'd fought to protect for him. The next weeks were a delicate dance. Diane and her daughters adjusted to the new reality, their interactions with Caleb less hostile but still strained. Lily, the younger one, started talking to him more, sharing her sketches, asking about his mom. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. Grace remained distant, loyal to her mother, but Caleb held out hope. He and Jamie began to plan, not just for the house, but for their future. Jamie moved in, his presence transforming the space. They painted the bedroom, hung new curtains, made it theirs. One night, as they cooked dinner together, Jamie said, "This feels like home now. Not just the house, you." Caleb's heart swelled. Yeah, you're my home too. But the peace was fragile. Richard's silence felt like a storm brewing, and Caleb knew his father wasn't done. One evening, Richard called him into the study, his face grim. "I'm selling the house," he said. "The trust lets you stay, but it doesn't stop me from selling. Diane and I need a fresh start." Caleb's stomach dropped. "You'd sell Mom's house, just to get rid of me." "It's not about you," Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's about moving forward." Caleb walked out, his mind reeling. Selling the house would mean starting over, but it would also mean Richard was cutting the last tie to his mother. He told Jamie, who cursed under his breath. "He's playing dirty," Jamie said, "but we're not out of moves." Alex confirmed that Richard could sell, but Caleb's claim would transfer to a portion of the proceeds. It wasn't the house, but it was something a chance to build a new home, one where he and Jamie could be free. Still, the thought of losing his mother's house, her memory, was a fresh wound. Caleb sat on the porch, his mother's journal in his lap, her words a quiet strength. "Never let anyone make you feel less than you are." He looked at Jamie, who was sketching designs for a new apartment, and felt a spark of hope. This fight wasn't over, but it had taught him something. His home wasn't just a place. It was the people he loved, the life he chose. The news of the house sale hit Caleb like a slow bleeding wound. He walked through the rooms, touching the walls where his mother's fingerprints still felt alive, imagining them gone, replaced by strangers. Jamie watched him, his own frustration simmering. But his voice was steady. "We can fight this too," he said, pulling Caleb close. "Or we can take the money and make something better." Caleb wanted to fight, to cling to every splinter of his mother's memory. But the exhaustion of the past months weighed on him. He sat with Jamie on their bench in the park, the carved initials under his fingers a reminder of love's endurance. "I don't want to lose her," he said, his voice breaking. "This house is all I have left of her." Jamie took his hand, his eyes fierce. "You haven't lost her. She's in you, Caleb. In everything you do. We'll carry her with us, wherever we go." Those words became Caleb's anchor. He met with Alex again, who outlined their options. They could challenge the sale in court, arguing undue hardship. But it would be a long, costly battle. Or they could accept the proceeds and start over. "The trust gives you a solid claim to the money," Alex said. "It's not the house, but it's enough for a new beginning." Caleb wrestled with the choice, torn between fighting for the past and building a future. Jamie, ever practical, started looking at apartments in Maplewood, small places they could afford with the trust money. "Picture it," he said one night, showing Caleb listings on his laptop. "Our own space. No one telling us who we can be." The idea sparked something in Caleb, a vision of a life unburdened by his father's judgment. But letting go of the house felt like letting go of his mother. And that pain was raw. He read her journal again. Her words a lifeline. "You are my heart." He realized she'd want him to be happy, not tethered to a fight that might break him. One evening, Caleb found Lily on the porch again, her sketchbook open to a drawing of the house. "I'm sorry about all this," she said, her voice small. "I didn't know it was your mom's place too." Caleb sat beside her, his anger softening. "It's not your fault. You're just trying to find your place. Same as me." Lily nodded, her pencil pausing. "Can I draw something for you? Maybe of your mom?" The offer caught Caleb off guard. A small bridge across the divide. "I'd like that," he said, his throat tight. The next day, he confronted Richard one last time. They stood in the living room, the space where Caleb's mother had once danced with him to old records. "Sell the house if you have to," Caleb said, his voice steady. "But I'm taking my share, and I'm building a life. You can't take that from me." Richard's eyes flickered with something regret. Maybe, but he only nodded. "Do what you want, Caleb. You always have." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest Caleb would get. He walked away, feeling lighter, like he'd shed a weight he'd carried too long. With the sale in motion, Caleb and Jamie found a small apartment downtown, a cozy place with big windows and room for their dreams. They moved in as the house sale closed. Caleb's share of the proceeds enough to cover the deposit and a few months' rent. The first night, they sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes, eating takeout and laughing. It wasn't the house, but it was theirs. Caleb hung his mother's photo on the wall, her smile a quiet presence. Lily's drawing arrived a week later, a delicate sketch of his mother based on old photos, her eyes warm and alive. Caleb framed it, placing it beside her photo, a reminder that love endures beyond walls. Richard faded from Caleb's life, their contact reduced to occasional texts. Diane and her daughters moved to a new house, and Caleb wished them well, no longer carrying the weight of their conflict. He'd fought for his place, and though he'd lost the house, he'd gained something greater, a home built on love, not obligation. Jamie proposed one evening, on their park bench, a simple ring in his hand and a nervous grin on his face. "Marry me," He said, "Let's make this official." Caleb's heart soared. The answer easy. Yes. The apartment was small, but it glowed with possibility. Caleb and Jamie painted the walls a soft blue, hung fairy lights, and filled the space with secondhand furniture that felt like theirs. Each night, they fell asleep to the hum of Maplewood outside, their hands entwined, their future no longer a question mark. Caleb's mother's journal sat on their bedside table, its pages worn from reading. Her words had guided him through the fight, reminding him who he was when the world tried to tell him otherwise. The house was gone, sold to a young family who'd fill it with new memories. But Caleb carried its heart with him. The money from the trust gave them a cushion, a chance to dream bigger, maybe a bookstore of their own one day, or a trip to places his mother had always wanted to see. Lily stayed in touch, sending sketches and shy texts. She and Grace visited once, their awkwardness fading as they laughed over Jamie's terrible cooking. Diane sent a curt note with the sale papers, but Caleb didn't hold it against her. They'd all been caught in Richard's storm, and Caleb was done carrying that weight. Richard himself was a ghost, his presence reduced to a name on a check. Caleb didn't hate him. Not anymore. He pitied him, a man so trapped by his own need for control that he'd pushed away his only son. Caleb hoped, in some quiet corner of his heart, that his father might one day understand. But he wasn't waiting for that day. The wedding was small, held in the park under their oak tree, the bench a silent witness. Ellen officiated, her voice warm as she spoke of love's resilience. Lily and Grace came, Lily clutching a sketchbook, Grace offering a shy smile. Alex was there too, toasting to Caleb's courage. Jamie's foster siblings filled the small crowd, their laughter a reminder of chosen family. Caleb wore a simple suit, Jamie a navy jacket that brought out his eyes. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to fight for each other, to build a home no one could take away. When Jamie slipped the ring onto Caleb's finger, the world felt right, like every battle had led to this moment. As they danced under string lights, Caleb thought of his mother. She'd have loved this Jamie's laugh, the way Caleb's heart felt full. He could almost hear her voice, whispering that he'd done her proud. Months later, Caleb and Jamie walked through Maplewood, hand in hand, the town no longer a battleground but a place of beginnings. They passed the old house, now alive with new voices, and Caleb felt a pang but no regret. He'd fought for his place, not just in a house, but in the world. And he'd won. At their bench, they sat, Jamie's head on Caleb's shoulder. "You ever think about how far we've come?" Jamie asked. Caleb smiled, kissing his temple. "Every day?" The fight had cost him a house, a father, a piece of his past. But it had given him something greater, a love that no one could take. A home built on truth, and a future he'd write himself. His mother's words echoed one last time. Never let anyone make you feel less than you are. Caleb hadn't, and he never would.